Malfunction on the flight. Olivia Carter stepped onto the flight with a composed yet commanding presence. She was dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, her glossy brown hair neatly tied back at the nape of her neck. A pricey leather bag hung over her shoulder, and in her hand was a first-class ticket that had been confirmed weeks in advance. Today was a busy day, but she maintained her usual poise. Olivia was not someone easily shaken by trivial matters. She made her way slowly into the first-class cabin, her eyes scanning the rows of premium leather seats, the quiet, luxurious atmosphere resembling an exclusive lounge for distinguished guests. Upon locating her seat, she gracefully placed her handbag in the overhead compartment before settling in, ready to enjoy a comfortable flight. But that peace was quickly disrupted. A cold, sharp voice rang out from above. "Excuse me, ma'am, I need to check your ticket." Olivia looked up, meeting the gaze of Jessica Morgan, a flight attendant with a stern expression, her blonde hair tied into a high ponytail, her uniform impeccably neat. Jessica stood upright, her hand extended expectantly for the ticket. Though slightly surprised, Olivia remained courteous as she retrieved her ticket from her bag and handed it over. Jessica glanced at the ticket, her brows knitting together. "Are you sure this is a first-class ticket?" There was an unmistakable hint of skepticism in her tone. Olivia narrowed her eyes. "I booked this ticket 3 weeks ago and had it confirmed by the airline. Is there an issue?" Jessica remained silent for a few seconds, her scrutinizing gaze scanning Olivia as if searching for a reason not to trust her. After a brief hesitation, she returned the ticket, though her expression remained rigid. Olivia dismissed the interaction. She retrieved a small notebook from her bag and began jotting down tasks to complete after the flight. But less than a minute later, Jessica returned, this time with a more assertive demeanor. "Ma'am, I need you to follow me to the back." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" Jessica crossed her arms, her tone firm and unyielding. "We need to verify your booking information." Passengers nearby began turning their heads, curiosity evident in their glances. A middle-aged man a few seats away arched an eyebrow, while an elderly couple exchanged puzzled looks. Olivia could feel the tension thickening in the first-class cabin. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady. "I have already presented my ticket. If there's an issue, I believe you can check your system rather than asking me to vacate my seat without a valid reason." Jessica tightened her grip on the folder in her hands, a fleeting flash of uncertainty in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a firm resolve. "I'm afraid you will need to move to the economy section." This time, the entire first-class cabin fell into stunned silence. A few passengers began whispering. Some shook their heads, others raised their brows in confusion. Olivia felt the oppressive weight of the moment pressing down on her. She was not one to lose her temper easily, but being treated as if she didn't belong here struck a nerve. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her deep brown eyes locking onto Jessica's. "And what's the reason? Have I violated any airline policies? Or are you making this decision based on something other than the facts before you?" Jessica hesitated, momentarily flustered, but quickly regained her composure. "We reserve the right to reassign seats if necessary. I advise you to cooperate." Olivia held her gaze for a few seconds. Then, without another word, she picked up her bag and stepped out of her seat with an air of unshaken grace, though a storm raged within her. All eyes followed her as she walked past the rows of seats, as though she were an outsider in this world. But Olivia refused to let the humiliation define her. The moment she set foot in the economy cabin, she pulled out her phone, opened her contacts, and typed a swift message. "I was just forced out of first class without a valid reason. Handle this immediately." She hit send. A faint smile played on her lips as she slipped the phone back into her bag. Olivia Carter was not someone to be dismissed lightly, and Jessica Morgan would soon realize she had made a grave mistake. An unexpected consequence for Jessica. Jessica Morgan stood in the first-class cabin, gripping the hem of her uniform tightly. She had believed her decision was the right one. She had assumed Olivia Carter was just an ordinary passenger, someone who didn't belong in this world of luxury. But now, as the chime of the intercom rang from the flight attendant's lounge, a heavy weight settled in her chest. The voice of the head flight attendant echoed through the small cabin speaker. Jessica, there's a call from the executive board. They need to speak with you immediately. A shiver ran down Jessica's spine. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure, and quickly walked toward the lounge where the phone's red indicator light was flashing. Picking up the receiver, she steadied her voice. Jessica Morgan speaking. The voice on the other end was cold and authoritative. Miss Morgan, this is Richard Hale from the executive board. We've just received a direct complaint from one of the company's most important stakeholders. Can you explain why passenger Olivia Carter was forced to leave her first-class seat without valid justification? Jessica's mouth opened, but no words came out. An important stakeholder? Olivia Carter? She had no idea who Olivia was, but clearly she had made a grave mistake. I checked her ticket, Jessica stammered. I thought there was an error in the booking. An error? Richard's voice sharpened. Miss Carter had a fully confirmed first-class ticket booked 3 weeks ago, and she's not just any passenger. She has direct connections to senior management. Do you realize the problem you've just created? It felt as though the floor beneath Jessica's feet had just dropped away. She had assumed Olivia was just another passenger, but the reality was far from what she had imagined. I'm sorry, she whispered, her hands beginning to tremble. I didn't know. I just thought, you thought wrong, Miss Morgan. Richard cut her off, his voice laced with disappointment. We cannot allow biased decisions to tarnish the airline's reputation. You are to submit a full report on this incident immediately, and when this flight lands, you will be summoned for an official review. I hope you understand the severity of this situation. Jessica stood frozen, the phone still clutched in her hand. In all her years as a flight attendant, she had never felt this kind of dread. She swallowed hard, her mind racing. If Olivia truly had connections to upper management, then a single complaint from her could destroy Jessica's career in an instant. She stepped out of the flight attendant's lounge, forcing herself to appear composed. But anyone watching closely could see the tension in her every step. As she returned to the first-class cabin, her eyes instinctively flickered toward the economy section where Olivia was seated. She still looked as calm as ever, her expression revealing nothing, not anger, not frustration. And that terrified Jessica even more. An angry passenger would shout, would make a scene. But Olivia Carter did none of that. She was waiting. And that was the most frightening thing of all. The turn of events, Jessica Morgan stood in the cramped galley of the airplane, her palms slick with sweat. The phone call from the executive board echoed in her mind like an unrelenting alarm. She couldn't believe that a single mistake had put her career on the line. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life. Jessica Morgan, please report to the cockpit immediately. The deep yet firm voice of Captain David Harris made Jessica freeze in place. Nearby passengers exchanged curious glances, some whispering among themselves. Swallowing hard, Jessica straightened her uniform and briskly walked towards the cockpit door. As she stepped inside, Captain Harris's cold gaze locked onto her. Sit down, he ordered, his tone devoid of warmth. Jessica obeyed, feeling as though she were on trial. She knew this wasn't just a routine discussion. David Harris clasped his hands together, his eyes never leaving hers. Miss Morgan, do you realize the gravity of your mistake? His voice carried a tinge of disappointment. Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Passenger Olivia Carter is not someone you can treat with disrespect. She has close ties to the airline's senior management. Your actions didn't just inconvenience an important passenger, they jeopardized the reputation of this airline. Jessica clenched her hands in her lap. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. I just thought. You thought wrong, Harris cut her off, his voice as sharp as a blade. And now I have direct orders from the executive board. You are to apologize to Miss Carter immediately and ensure she receives the service she is entitled to. Jessica felt her stomach twist. But in front of all the passengers? Captain Harris stared at her for a long moment before replying, his voice cold. You can do it now, or you can wait until we land and explain yourself before the disciplinary board. I don't think you want the second option. Jessica bit her lip, knowing there was no way out. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, her steps feeling unbearably heavy as she walked back to the economy cabin. Passengers quickly turned their heads, their eyes filled with curiosity. They had witnessed the earlier incident, and now they were eager to see what would happen next. Olivia Carter sat upright, her seat, her sharp gaze fixed on Jessica. She remained composed, yet there was an undeniable authority in her presence. Jessica inhaled deeply before speaking. Miss Carter, I would like to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience I caused you. I was wrong to ask you to leave your first-class seat without valid justification. I hope you can accept my apology. A heavy silence filled the cabin. Olivia studied Jessica for a moment before giving a small nod. I appreciate your apology, but I believe this matter should be properly addressed once we land. Jessica felt a slight relief, but the tension in her chest remained. She knew this wasn't over. When the plane finally touched down, Jessica wished she could vanish, but reality wouldn't allow it. As passengers began disembarking, 2 security officers in black uniforms entered the cabin, striding straight toward her. One of them asked, his voice calm yet authoritative. Jessica swallowed hard. Yes, I'm Jessica Morgan. Please come with us. We need you to assist in an investigation regarding the incident on this flight. Passengers who hadn't yet disembarked stopped in their tracks, watching the scene unfold with hushed whispers. Jessica felt every pair of eyes on her, and it made her want to disappear. She nodded and stepped forward, flanked by the security officers. As she walked past Olivia, she glanced at the woman briefly. Olivia simply watched her, saying nothing. Yet in her gaze, there was no gloating, only an unreadable firmness. The airplane door shut behind Jessica, marking an irreversible turning point. She had lost control, and this time, there was no way back. Long-term consequences and lessons learned. Olivia Carter stepped off the plane with a composed demeanor, her strides steady yet thoughtful. What had happened was not just an in-flight incident. It was a reflection of a larger systemic issue, one she knew had to change. As the cabin doors closed behind her, Olivia took a deep breath, ensuring that she maintained her signature calm. Jessica Morgan, on the other hand, did not have such composure. Escorted off the plane by security personnel, she felt the weight of every gaze from both passengers and colleagues. Shame washed over her like a cold wave. She couldn't believe that the career she had spent years building was now crumbling because of one bad decision. But deep down, Jessica knew she had no one to blame but herself. The decisive meeting. In a high-level boardroom at the airline's headquarters, Olivia sat across from the executives, her sharp eyes scanning the faces in front of her. None of them dared to take the situation lightly. They understood that Olivia was not just another first-class passenger. She was someone with significant influence in the aviation industry. I am not here for a simple apology, Olivia spoke, her tone steady but firm. I am here to ensure that this never happens to anyone else again. The board members remained silent, exchanging nervous glances. Richard Hale, the airline's CEO, cleared his throat before speaking. Miss Carter, first and foremost, we extend our sincerest apologies. We fully acknowledge the severity of this incident and are committed to making the necessary changes. I need more than verbal commitments, Mr. Hale. Olivia replied, her gaze unwavering. I want to see actual changes in the way your flight attendants are trained. I want a clear policy in place to prevent discriminatory actions based on personal biases. And signaled to his assistant. We will immediately implement a new training program focused on unconscious bias awareness and ensuring that all airline staff are educated on equitable passenger treatment. Olivia gave a small nod, partially satisfied but still resolute. I also expect quarterly progress reports on this initiative. If I don't see real change, I won't hesitate to take this matter public. A heavy silence filled the room. No one doubted the weight behind Olivia's words. After a tense few seconds, Hale finally responded. "We understand, Miss Carter. We will make sure you receive the necessary updates." Olivia studied him for a moment before nodding. "Good. I hope we never have to meet under these circumstances again." The inevitable dismissal. Meanwhile, Jessica Morgan sat in the HR director's office, her hands cold as ice. In front of her lay a thick file filled with documents related to the internal investigation. "Jessica," the HR director began, his voice firm but not unkind. "After a thorough review, the leadership team has decided to suspend you immediately. I regret to inform you that your employment with the airline is being terminated." Jessica clenched her jaw, her heart sinking. She had anticipated this, but hearing it aloud still hit like a sledgehammer. I understand," she murmured, her voice hoarse. The HR director sighed. "We hope you take this as a learning experience. Your actions didn't just impact yourself, they cost the airline significantly." Jessica lowered her head, guilt constricting her chest. She had been too self-assured, too convinced of her judgment, without considering the broader consequences. When out the letter of remorse. A few weeks later, Olivia received an unexpected email. It was a letter from Jessica Morgan. "Dear Miss Carter, I'm not sure if you will read this, but I felt the need to reach out in the hopes of expressing my deep regret. I have spent a great deal of time reflecting on what happened during that flight, on how I treated you unfairly. I have no excuses for my actions, and I fully accept the consequences I now face. I have lost the job I love, but more importantly, I have come to understand the harm I caused. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I have learned a hard lesson. I am currently enrolled in a bias awareness program, and I hope that one day I can make amends through meaningful actions. Once again, I sincerely apologize. Sincerely." Olivia sat still, her eyes scanning the words. She had not expected an apology, but this letter gave her pause. At the very least, Jessica had come to recognize her mistake, and that, however small, was a sign of change. Taking a deep breath, Olivia set the letter down. She didn't know if Jessica would truly change, but she believed that everyone deserved a second chance, if they genuinely sought to make things right. Through the office window, she watched as a plane ascended into the clear blue sky, carrying with it the hope of a future where all passengers would be treated with fairness and respect. Olivia knew that she hadn't just changed one person's fate, she had started to change an entire system. Systemic change. Never thought that a flight could change an entire system. But it happened. She not only reclaimed her rights, but also initiated a reform in the airline industry. After the highly controversial incident with Jessica Morgan, the airline had to reevaluate its training procedures. They realized that if they wanted to maintain their reputation, they needed to change from the ground up. The reform begins. The airline quickly implemented a series of training courses on unconscious bias and customer service attitudes. Flight attendants were required to participate in intensive training sessions on treating passengers fairly without prejudice or personal judgment. The first training session took place in a large conference room where over 100 flight attendants sat in silence, listening attentively. On the stage, a psychology expert in unconscious bias stood before a large projector screen, explaining the negative impacts of discrimination in the service industry. "We often think we are fair, but in reality, every small decision can be influenced by biases we don't even recognize," the expert said, his voice calm but impactful. Among the attendees, one flight attendant quietly took notes. Jessica Morgan. She knew she had been wrong, and this time she wanted to make amends. Jessica's transformation. After being fired from the airline, Jessica went through a difficult period. She not only lost her beloved job, but also lost confidence in herself. But instead of wallowing in failure, Jessica decided to rise again. One day, while searching for new opportunities, she came across a job posting from a nonprofit organization dedicated to social justice. They were looking for someone with experience in customer service to train others on bias awareness and fair treatment. Jessica, applied. She was interviewed by the organization's director, a middle-aged woman with sharp yet kind eyes. You know, we're looking for people who can change, not just those who have never made mistakes. Do you think you're a good fit? The director asked. Jessica swallowed hard and then nodded. I think my biggest mistake was not realizing the problem sooner, but I want to change, not just for myself, but to help others avoid making the same mistake. I believe you can. Welcome to the team. Olivia and the oversight of change. Meanwhile, Olivia didn't stop. She regularly attended meetings with the airline's executives, demanding updates on the reform progress. Each quarter, she received detailed reports on the training sessions, the number of attendants participating, and employee feedback. One day, while checking in on one of the training sessions, Olivia unexpectedly saw a familiar face, Jessica Morgan. Jessica was standing at the podium, talking about her own lessons, sharing what she had learned and how she had changed. Olivia quietly took a seat in the back row, listening intently to every word Jessica said. Jessica spoke about the fateful flight, her mistakes, and how a single moment could change a person's life. But instead of complaining, she turned it into a cautionary tale to help other flight attendants understand the importance of fairness. When the training session ended, Olivia stood up and walked to the front. Jessica turned around, their eyes meeting in a silent but meaningful moment. I didn't think you'd be here, Jessica said, slightly uneasy. Olivia smiled. I didn't think you'd be here either, but I'm glad you are. Jessica sighed, her eyes slightly red. I made mistakes, and I think if I can help someone avoid repeating them, then it's worth doing. That's a good start. The future and hope. As time passed, the system gradually changed for the better. The airline became one of the leading companies in ensuring a fair work and customer service environment. Passengers began to notice a difference in the attendants' attitudes, and incidents like Olivia's no longer occurred. As for Jessica, she continued working at the nonprofit organization becoming a strong advocate for social justice. She couldn't change the past, but she could contribute to building a better future. Olivia, after everything, continued her career, fighting for fairness, not just in the airline industry, but in many other fields. She knew that victories don't come from a single moment, but from persistent and unwavering efforts. Looking back on what had happened, Olivia didn't feel triumphant or pleased that Jessica was punished. Instead, she felt satisfied that she had helped create meaningful change, one that truly mattered, and that, to her, was the most important victory. Key message. This story highlights the power of calmness, intelligence, and strategically confronting injustice. Olivia not only reclaimed her personal rights, but also drove systemic change, ensuring that no one would have to go through the same experience again.